Hello and welcome back to Engage TV from Sydney, Australia. I am delighted to introduce my guest today. Mr. Craig Pearce has more than 16 years in business communication. He is a PR pro and blogger. He is the principal of Craig Pearce Strategic Communication. More recently though, he's published a free e-report called Public Relations 2011 Issues, Insights and Ideas. A fantastic report. I've been scouring it for the last 3 or 4 weeks now since its publication. It features 15 articles from 11 authors globally. A fantastic piece of work. Craig, welcome to Engage TV.
Thank you.
For those of us who don't know as much about your career, your time in communications and across the various sectors of marcoms, could you tell us a little bit more about you and your time in communications?
Sure. Well, as you said, I've been in public relations for about 16 years. Worked across a diversity of industries, anything from health to engineering to nuclear to CSR to government. Worked both in-house, in agencies and with my own sole operator business for the last couple of years. Communicated on everything from neutron diffraction science to women's obstetric and gynecological issues to careers for school children. So a pretty diverse, all-rounded type background.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to talk today primarily about the report. It is a great piece of work and I'm not sure how long it took you to put together, but could you give us a bit of insight into how you and your 11 or 10 other contributing authors put this together and what really inspired it from your perspective?
Well, the fact that I'm linked into, and literally and metaphorically speaking, to a lot of very intelligent, very insightful thought leaders and public relations practitioners from around the world got me thinking it would be nice to somehow, I guess, gather a lot of these great thinkers together into a single spot, into a single report. So I thought that would be a great thing to do, and I wanted to utilise their knowledge. Of course, by having such credible, insightful thought leaders from around the world with their names next to my name, it actually makes me look better than I actually really am. So it's applying, public relations best practice in strategic alliance, third-party credibility, thought leadership, just putting that in action. And I also wanted to go through the process, even though I've put together a couple of reports previously, this was a different sort of approach. And I wanted to make it a report that people had to email subscribe to my blog to download. This is the best practice way of gaining subscribers, according to some of the most successful and professional bloggers around the world. So I wanted to go through that process, as well as just pitching it out to other bloggers, pitching it out to other media. So it was a big learning experience for me. Plus, of course, as I said before, I get to rub shoulders with some great public relations minds and learn from them. And learning in many different dimensions is something that's very important to me, and I think it's a fundamental tenet of being successful in anything, and that very much includes public relations.
Just aside, if you would like a free copy of the report, you can subscribe through craigpearce.info. You can also follow Craig on Twitter and links to all his social profiles at Comain, C-O-M-M-A-I-M. Now, 15 articles across around 36 pages. There's a lot of material there, so I'm not going to be able to quiz you on all of it today. We might have to do a parts 2, 3, 4 and 5 to get through all of that. I'd like to cover a few of the main points that I got out of it, or a few of the perhaps controversial points also. One of the early things that I got out of it as a recent student was that Professor Jim McNamara from the UTS in Sydney calls for more theory at a time when perhaps more practice is being advocated for. What are your thoughts on that idea?
Well, I had a number of thoughts about Jim's article, and two that came to mind is that I totally support his call for more theory. Theory helps crystallise, it helps clarify. It's synergistic with strategy. How you can have a proper holistic strategy without referring to any sort of theory is a mystery to me. It helps give you the bigger picture. It helps add more rigour to what you're doing. It helps deliver a better product. What's not to like? That's one thing, and I don't think there's enough of that reference to theory in professional public relations practice. Some of it's a bit too shoot from the hip. One of the old criticisms is there's not enough evaluation done in public relations. This is all intrinsic and inherent within strategic thinking, within applying best practice public relations theory within its practice. Another one is that we're all hopefully pretty familiar with two-way symmetrical communication and its mixed model, which is another variation of it as well. Since all that's come about, and I'm fairly up with academic research into public relations, there hasn't been any great, big, significant moves to my mind to add value to the professional practice of public relations. So I think it's about time the academics sort of got their act together a bit and provided us with a bit more meat in the bun so to help us practice public relations a bit more effectively.
Transitioning to social media, Trevor Young, the PR warrior who we've had on Engage TV before, came out with perhaps fighting words when he said that people in the agency environment are leaving those in-house far behind when it comes to social media. Do you agree with him on this one?
Trevor's a lovely man. He's a great thinker.
Hello, Trevor.
He's far too gentle. He needed to go a bit harder there. Trevor put what he thought in a very gentle, modest, humble manner. And I think the reality is far in advance of what he actually said. I think that in general, in-house practitioners are being left for dead for agency practitioners. Just to a large degree, I think academics are playing catch-up in a big way to agency professionals as well. I don't think there's enough theory out there that discusses social media, that investigates. Of course, academia is hamstrung a bit by the processes they need to go through to really be deeply reflective and base their thoughts on research as well. But definitely agencies as a way out there. You go to public relations conferences or seminars, it's agency people who are speaking. You look around for thought leadership, it's agency people who are there. You look at who's publishing blogs online about public relations, agency people. I can't think of any one in-house person in Australia, and I think it's pretty similar all around the world, an in-house public relations professional who has a blog on public relations or a complementary topic. But there's many examples of why agencies are really out there, and I even go as far as to think that arguably in-house communication teams shouldn't even bother having a social media capability in-house. They need to have someone who can talk the language, who knows what's going on. But because of the speed of change within social media, even with Facebook, there's constant changes just for one platform. How someone in-house can be expected to keep up with all of that. Agencies are paid to be on the ball, to be at the edge. In-house people are hamstrung by processes, by protocols, and just the structure and nature of the team. Arguably, there should be agencies that are delivering nearly all social media capability for in-house professionals.
You also write a great piece about social media providing a vehicle for public relations to become more influential as a business practice or a business discipline. At the present, do you think that practitioners, and this applies across the in-house and the agency environment, are utilising social media to its fullest in regards to its capability to leverage the discipline as a business discipline?
This is where public relations is an epic fail. Public relations is simply not utilising the opportunity that social media is presenting it with to become more influential as a business discipline. Crisis communication may be the way in, how they can, I guess, raise their profile and become more credible, because they can use social media to detect issues, to react to issues, to communicate with stakeholders, to influence stakeholders. But at the moment, and I've spoken to many professionals in Australia especially about what they're doing and what research they might have done, or how they're leveraging their increased profile and the increased resonance of their communication because of social media and its availability everywhere. And the answers come back a little bit whiffly-waffly. There's not really much that they're saying. So I think there's a real gap there, and public relations should be taking this opportunity to jump on the increased profile of social media to become more influential. There's plenty of opportunities there, in my opinion.
There you are, folks, a great opportunity for us in the profession. Dwight Whitney wrote a piece very counter, I suppose, in sentiment to a lot of popular kind of thought, particularly regarding social networks and humanising communications, or as a humanising force. I think he even said that Facebook was simply a media channel, and that the social platforms are essentially dehumanising communication, or drawing away from what should be fundamentally a human form of communication, taking away from reality, not enhancing it. Again, fighting words is something that's very counter to popular sentiment, or at least the sentiment that's published out there in the public domain. Do you agree with him on this one?
I think Dwight raises a really interesting point, and obviously it has been discussed before, but Dwight's an example of the sort of people who I wanted to associate with in the report, because he's challenging. He's throwing out a bit of dynamite out there. He's being a thought leader. You can't be a thought leader without ruffling a few feathers, or else you're just being too vanilla, too bland. It's not interesting. But with what Dwight's saying, one of the key points that he makes is that, as you said, it's depersonalising, it's dehumanising a communication medium. And I guess it's all in the eyes of the beholder. as other observers have countered Dwight with, you might go onto Facebook and it can be very cold, it can be very frigid, it can be very mechanical, but for some people who are struggling to actually articulate things face to face, for some people who might have emotional or traumatic situations going on and they're just a bit afraid to communicate, they can almost hide behind Facebook to an extent, and it can actually build their confidence and help them start to communicate with people. So, counter to what Dwight said, I think it can actually be a very humane form of communication. Of course, you can go the other way as well, and as I said, you can hide behind it. Well, you can literally hide behind it. You can do devious and nasty things through Facebook as well. So I guess it just depends on the instance, the individual. Another, I guess, implication of what Dwight says goes back to the reading and writing dimension, and I think that in public relations we can fall victim to the communication as soundbite, and social media has accelerated our move from beyond media, where TV news, for instance, is always about the soundbite. Social media, it can become even shorter at times, 140 characters. Facebook, sometimes even less, it just depends on the instance. Of course, at the end of the day, it comes down to what you're communicating about, who you're communicating to, what the issues, barriers, opportunities are. Is social media, Facebook, etc., is that a great way to communicate and build relationships according to those who you want to build relationships with? If it is, great. That's not always the case. But let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater as well. Public relations needs to become more literate. We need to become better writers. And I can't see that happening with this increasing reliance on social media. You could argue that it's introducing a new vocabulary, a new lexicon, a new language of the way we communicate. But too many people in public relations don't read enough literature. They aren't good enough writers. Writing is our #1 skill. We need to get our act together a bit more in that regard.
There you are, folks. You heard it here first. CSR, an area I'm pretty passionate about. It's an area that's growing. It involves communication and business, and again, a great opportunity for PR and communications to transcend it and become more influential as a business discipline. Paul Seaman writes an article in the report in which he talks about trust. Now, in PR we are making a great virtue, an even greater virtue it seems with social media and transparency about the issue of trust. But he writes that we've confused trust with healthy scepticism, and that this is essentially corrosive to the debate about communications in CSR and sustainability communications. Do you agree with him that we are kind of confusing scepticism with trust? Or is it a case of, no, trust is out there, it's a virtue, we're right on the money with it?
Paul raises a number of really interesting points. He's a very intelligent writer. He's a bit more right-leaning than me, but he's a punk rocker at heart, so you've got to empathise with the guy.
Hello, Paul.
On his blog, he actually writes many interesting pieces with the CSR theme, and so what he's provided for the report is actually just the tip of the iceberg. But one of the dimensions I find quite interesting with Paul, and I tend to agree with him, is that we're employed by organisations, either as a consultant or in-house. If we're applying two-way symmetrical communication, then we're there as, I guess, boundary spanners. We're articulating stakeholders' perspectives and views to organisations to get the organisation to change, as much as we are the organisation's perspective to get stakeholders to change. Who's paying our bills? The organisation's paying our bills. If we're working for an organisation that we don't trust, that we don't feel comfortable getting on a platform and being a cheerleader for, what are we doing there? So I think this is one of the complicating issues with the whole thing of applying and practicing two-way symmetrical communication, but being paid by one of the parties. So it's interesting. I think it's a constant ethical and moral challenge for those in public relations, because it's a wonderful discipline, and we do have an opportunity to promote organisational change and stakeholder change, which altogether equals societal change. So we actually have work in an area which I think is incredibly inspiring to do if we choose to take the opportunity and not just be a broadcast mechanism.
There are certainly an incredible amount of opportunities out there, particularly with social media and trust as well, and dialogic communication. As a parting thought, and again, I'd love to sit here for a couple of hours and do a parts 2, 3, 4 and 5 about the report. But as a parting word, you write 2 articles at the end about the power of PR and also fundamental truths for success in modern PR, because as we said, it is changing and it's changing rapidly. Although the fundamental skills, for example, writing that you mentioned, may still be at the heart, we can't deny that it is changing. What do you believe, from the beginner, who's just starting in their tertiary education perhaps, to the seasoned pro, for them, what is or what are, I should say, the fundamental truths of success in the modern day public relations, and what power can these truths unlock for them?
Well, that's a pretty big question, but at the heart of it, it's writing is a core skill. Become a good writer, become a better writer, become an even better writer. It's still applicable in a social media world as anywhere else. When you're starting out, get into as much internship experience as you can. Get agency experience. You'll never, it'll always be an incredibly valuable experience working in an agency as opposed to working in-house. It's different pressures, it's a different dynamic. You learn a huge amount. You learn to rely on your own skills and motivation, so it's a terrific experience. Always having a hunger to learn. The moment you stop wanting to learn is the moment that your effectiveness as a communication professional starts to diminish. Other aspects include thinking about when you're communicating, what do you want to do? Do you want to just inform someone? Do you want to influence them? Do you want to change their perspectives? Think about it strategically, going back to that discussion about theory and strategy. Think of the bigger picture. Learn from other people as much as you can. Public relations can simply be about communication. Communication is at the basis for change, because if people don't hear of different perspectives, if they don't learn things, then how will they change? So it's at the very core of enabling change, which is a wonderful thing to occur in society, as long as it's for the good, of course. So we've got a choice to make. Do we want to just be there to broadcast, to let people know information, or do we want to be part of a bigger picture where we can affect positive change on society? I think we've got an opportunity in public relations to do that. It's up to us to choose whether we want to leverage it or not.
It's a question that we're all going to have to answer for ourselves along the way. Craig Pearce, thank you so much for your time. It's been a real pleasure meeting you and also having you on Gauge TV. Thank you for sharing the report, for putting it together along with your contributing authors. I'd encourage you again to connect with Craig. He's on all the social platforms. For your copy of the report, again, subscribe at craigpearce.info, and also if you'd like to reach out to him on Twitter and then the various social platforms, he is at ComAim, COMMAIM. Thanks again, Craig. Until next time, that's another episode of Engage TV from Sydney, Australia. We'll look forward to chatting to you again very soon.